What's up, guys? Welcome back to the shop. In today's video, we're going to continue working on this billet that we worked on in the previous video. If you haven't checked that out, be sure to check it out. I'll have a little card up on the corner if you want to go check that out. All right, let's get started. First things first, once I find my wave pattern that I'm working with, I'm going to mark out where I'm going to grind off the material and make sure I have a nice clean edge and I don't have any of that cracking or delamination in it. I know it's hard to tell from the video right here, but I got it nice and clean. There's no longer any cracks there. So it's time to forge our knife out. I wasn't too sure what to make out of this knife, so I decided to just go with the flow, and it's already looking roughly like a knife shape anyways. So all I did was mark out where my handle is gonna start by knocking in that little corner and forging in my handle. Here I took it to the press and I'm just making some slight indentations just to help move the steel along, and afterwards I'm just gonna hand hammer it all into place and get it roughly where I want it to be. Here I'm trying to forge in the butt of the knife as much as possible. Just try to have as little amount of waste as possible. That way I can have the longest knife I can. It doesn't come out exactly how I want it, but nothing the grinder won't fix. Now looking back at it, one of the mistakes I did when forging this knife was right here when I started hitting it on that corner. I rounded over the corner and that caused that little back end to dip down, and I ended up just grinding it out because I didn't like the way it looked afterwards. And here I'm going to start drawing out the bevels. I'm going to draw them out mainly because I need more width to this knife. It's not very wide to begin with, but I also don't have a lot of material. So I'm going to draw out as much as I possibly can. That way I can get the widest knife I can while also getting roughly that shape that I want to have it. And this is a very repetitive process. All I'm doing is hammering down on the edge, bringing that steel down while still keeping my spine roughly the same thickness. Afterwards, I'll go and taper it down just a tad. But it's just back and forth, making sure both my sides are even. That way, once I grind, I have a nice, even surface that I can reference. Lately, I've been watching a lot of Neil Moore's videos, and the way he forges out knives, pretty much forced to finish with very little grinding. And I find myself wanting to start and doing more force to finish knives and try to get better with my hand-eye coordination. It looks easy on camera, but it really isn't, trying to get all those curves and angles just right the way he does it, and it really is a master's work to get that done the right way. But I mean, practice. And here, now that the knife is pretty much already to shape, it was pretty much the shape to begin with. All I did was draw out the edge a little bit, and to give it a slight curve, I'm gonna check make sure the spine is nice and straight and the edge is straightish. It's gonna have enough meat on there to grind off and get everything straight. But the straighter I can get it in the forge, the less grind and the less tweaking I have to do afterwards. Here I'm starting to grind out the profile of the knife, and I'm grinding in that butt cap that I had said earlier, the butt of the knife, where I had accidentally bent it down a little bit more than I would have wanted to. But overall, I still get a pretty nice knife shape. And here you can see the color of my knife changed, and that's because that hole was too hard to grind, so I had to temper it back with my torch. And we quench. And this is a knife fresh out of the temper. As you can see, I didn't grind very much of it just to make sure I got a very nice straight knife. Now it's time to grind off all that material. I tend to leave my knives a little bit thicker whenever I quench, mainly for the reason that I have to go back and finish grind regardless. And the second reason is because I've overground pre-heat treat, and I've heat treated knives to the point where they're all wavy and they're basically unfixable. And because of that, I've decided to just leave them a even thickness. These ceramic belts eat away at that steel regardless, so it's just an insurance for me. Here I've been using this digital dial a lot lately, and it's really been a game changer for me for 60 bucks, so I can't recommend it enough. Definitely a game changer, especially when doing handles. I've been considering getting a granite stone, that way I can pair it up with this guy and get a more consistent mark on my knives, and that's a thought I'll probably be doing here in the near future. And as you can see, these belts really do go right through that steel like it's butter, even though it's already hardened. Of course, I gotta be careful, make sure I don't overheat my blade. That would be a no-no, that would damage my temper, but as long as I keep it nice and cool, no biggie. And on to everybody's favorite step, the hand sand. I spend probably a good 4 or 5 hours doing this on this knife, trying to get it up to 1000 grit, very nice and clean. It's a pain, but it's a very important part of the process. The handle material I'm going to be using for this knife are these two stabilized green dyed poplar handle, I believe it's poplar. And I'm going to pair it with some hidden pins. For some reason lately I don't like breaking apart the look of the knife by having an exposed pin. It probably is better for the knife overall, but it looks a lot cooler when there's no exposed pin, so I'm going with that for this build. Another reason I'm going with that is because I've already trashed another piece of handle material that you guys don't know about, because I messed up the hole and I made it a little too big. It wobbled on me and I had to trash it and get this. This is actually my second choice. The first choice was a blue handle material that was absolutely gorgeous that I ended up messing up. But we don't talk about that. We act like it didn't happen and move on. I don't know if anybody's noticed, but my bandsaw is actually damaged. One of the guides on the bottom fell off and I accidentally swept it and threw it away because I didn't know what it was. So it's a little bit wobbly, so I have to carefully cut, and hopefully I can get that fixed sooner than later. Because this knife is going to be a hidden pin construction, I have to get the handle very, very close to my finished dimensions and actually put it on the knife with a little dab of super glue, and then I have to grind it all to shape, hand sand it on the knife, and get everything basically to where it needs to be finished. And then from there I can glue up after I do all my etching and all that good process. That way, once it's time to glue, the knife is basically done. I didn't record this part, but here I've already glued it up together. Put a little dab of CA glue on both sides, and I'm just gonna grind up to it, get everything nice and flush. One of the issues with doing it like this is that once you glue it up at the very end, you're screwed. The way you set it is the way you set it. And whenever you're doing these holes, even though I'm using 3/16 inch pin stock and a 3/16 inch drill bit, there's a little bit of a wobble, so if I'm not careful, it'll be a little bit out of whack and I can't really do anything about it. It's very, very little, barely even noticeable, but yeah, it happened to me at the end of this, so that's why I'm letting you guys know. Always watch out for that. Here I'm grinding in the shoulders, and I'm just doing all this by eye. I didn't mark any lines, I'm just going with the flow. And I'm doing a very simple design, kind of squared out handle, but where they taper to it towards the front, wider towards the back to help give it a nice comfortable feel in your palm, and also pretty rounded over on all the edges. That way it's a nice comfortable feel. It's my standard grind if I'm not doing a Coke bottle. And here I'm gonna start tapering those edges over and making sure that the knife has that nice sleek taper towards the front. That way it's more comfortable in a pinch grip as well. I didn't want to bother you guys with the boring hand sanding on this, but I've hand sanded it up to 1000 grit already, and I'm just popping off those scales. As you can see, I had those two little dots of CA glue on both sides, on both ends, and on both sides of the scales. And I'm just using a utility knife and popping them open nice and carefully, trying not to damage them. Overall, I like the look of them, and it feels really great in the hand. Here, as I'm etching, I'd like to invite you guys to subscribe if you're not already subscribed. That way you can help the channel grow. Also, if you guys are interested, my social medias are in the description down below. Feel free to go to Instagram or Twitter and give me a follow. I greatly appreciate it, and I'll be more active on those platforms going forward, and I'll be doing some cool stuff there as well down the line. And I would appreciate the support very, very much. I actually had a difficult time getting this knife dark enough, and I ended up leaving it in the coffee overnight. Normally I would think 1 to 2, maybe 3 hours would do it, but it didn't, and I ended up leaving it in overnight, and it got significantly darker than I would have wanted. Here I'm grinding a notch into the handle on both sides, that way I can get a better glue up. This is something I should have done earlier, so I'm being very, very careful not to damage anything, so it looks a little odd. And now it's time to glue up. I don't know if you've ever noticed, but whenever I glue up, I always use 5-minute epoxy because I am impatient. A lot of other makers, they use 24-hour epoxy and stuff like that. I don't really like using that because I only work on one project at a time, and if I have to wait an entire day for my glue up to set, I cannot get videos out in a timely manner. I already can get them out in a timely manner as it is, but that would slow me down even more. So I always use 5-minute epoxy, and I always use a little bit of black tint in there, a little bit of black pigment, and that helps just hide any imperfections that I might have on the knife, because as you know, I am a beginner and I'm still very, very new to this, and I do not make perfect knives. Definitely don't make perfect knives. Another thing I learned, but unfortunately I didn't capture it on camera because I was out of the actual frame. I learned from a Neil Kamimura video that you can actually break apart the epoxy with Johnson's paste wax, and so I've been using that lately to clean off the epoxy from my knives instead of using acetone or anything like that, because it does seep in a little bit and damage the edges and it weakens the glue. And so far it's been working pretty well. So after I squeeze all the glue out that I need to get out of there, I clean it up with some Johnson paste wax, and it gives a very, very nice clean to it. I did not know that. You learn something new every day. And here is the finished knife. Because I did 52-100 with 52-100, I didn't get a lot of contrast on the actual wave of it. You can see it in there, you can see it clearly, but there's not enough contrast. I wanted there to be more contrast from the ball bearings and lines going through it from the chrome in the ball bearings, but I didn't get that, and I'm not sure why. But overall, it looks pretty cool, black on black with a bright green handle, and it pops out quite a bit, and I'm very happy with it. But as always, guys, thank you very much for watching. I really appreciate it, and I will catch you guys on the next one. Peace.